Hello everyone, I'm Dr.Avani Ratan. I'm here today to provide you the answer key for National Forensic Sciences University MPhil Clinical Psychology Entrance Examination 2025. And soon after my session with you, we will be joined by Dr. Milan to help you with the biopsychology aspect of the entrance exam. Starting with the first question. So in probability, mutually exclusive events mean A, they can occur together, B, they cannot occur together, C, they are independent, and D, they are dependent. So in probability, mutually exclusive events mean they cannot occur together. B is the right answer. Why? Because mutually exclusive events are events that cannot happen simultaneously. As an example, a coin cannot land on both heads and tails at the same time. So the first one, that they can occur together, is the wrong answer. C, that they are independent. So independence refers to whether one event affects the other one's probability. And the last one, it is incorrect that they are dependent, because dependence is about the conditional probability relationships. So mutually exclusive events have zero probability of occurring together. So here they have a zero probability of occurring together. Moving to the second question, a p-value less than 0.05 typically indicates A, a non-significant result, B, significant result, C, high error, and B, no difference. So the correct answer here would be significant result, option B. Now, why is this the correct answer? Because when P is lesser than 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis and we conclude that there is a statistically significant effect or difference. Here, in the first one, the non-significant difference would be where P is greater than or equal to 0.05. C is a high error, which is vague, it is incorrect. D is no difference, which suggests no significance between the statistical values. So here the p-value threshold of 0.05 is the conventional criteria for statistically significant values. Moving on to the third one, a hypothesis is A, a fact, B, a prediction, C, a law, and D, a statistic. So the correct answer would be B. Why is this correct? Because a hypothesis is a testable prediction about the relationship between variables which are derived from theory or observation, right? So it is a hypothesis is a testable prediction about the relationship between variables which are derived from either theory or observation. Now, what is a fact? Why is this an incorrect option? Because fact is an established truth. Here, fact is an established truth. It is not a prediction. Law, why is this incorrect? Because law is an established principle. and statistic is a numerical summary. All right. So here hypotheses are predictions that can be tested empirically. So here B is the correct answer. Moving on, which type of graph is commonly used to display correlation? So the correct answer here is D, scatter plot. Why is that so? Because scatter plots show the relationship between two continuous variables, right? Here we are looking at the relationship between two continuous variables. And it makes a correlation pattern visible, making the correlation pattern visible. Alright, that's why it's the correct answer. Bar charts, they show categorical data. Pie charts, they show us proportions. Whereas a histogram, they show us a frequency distribution. Hence, we can summarize that scatter plots, they visualize the correlation relationships between the continuous variables. Hence, it is the correct answer. Moving on, what does a regression line represent? A, frequency of variables. B, best fit line to predict Y from X. C, median values. And D, standard deviation. The correct answer here would be B, which is a best fit line to predict Y from X. Why? Because a regression line is the line of the best fit that minimizes the sum of the squared errors. It minimizes the sum of the squared errors, and it also allows the prediction of dependent variable from the independent variable. Next, it also would allow us the prediction of dependent variable, which is the dv, from the independent variable, which is the iv. So the first option, which says the frequency of variables, so the frequency relates to distribution. Here the frequency is related to distribution. It is not related to regression. The median values are measures of central tendencies. C is the measures of central tendency. And standard deviation, it measures variability. So this is a measure of variability. Hence, B is the correct answer, where regression lines enable the prediction by showing the best linear relationship between two variables. So this also shows us the best linear relationship between two variables. All right, the next question. Which approach is most likely to use thought records and behavioral experiments? A, client-centered therapy. B, psychoanalysis. C, cognitive behavioral therapy. And D, existential therapy. So here the correct answer is C. cognitive behavior therapy, which is CBT. So here CBT specially uses thought records to identify and challenge the dysfunctional thoughts and behavioral experiments to test the beliefs, right? So the first one, the client-centered therapy, it focuses on an unconditional positive regard. Here the focus is on unconditional positive regard. In psychoanalysis, we use free association and interpretation. So here free association and interpretation is used. In existential therapy, the focus is on meaning and choice. So the thought records and the behavioral experiments are a major part of CBT. It is a hallmark technique which includes the systematic examination of thoughts and behavioral testing. Next question. Carl Jung's therapeutic approach is best described as A. Logotherapy, B. Analytical psychology, C. Behavior therapy, and D. Existential therapy. Here, the correct answer is B, which is analytical psychology, because Jung developed analytical psychology which emphasized the collective unconscious, archetypes, and individuation. So here he talked about individuation. He also talked about archetypes and focused on a collective unconscious. So B is the correct answer. So logotherapy was developed by Viktor Frankl. Here behavior therapy focuses on conditioning. Existential therapy emphasizes meaning and choice. So Jung's approach focuses on the unconscious. It particularly focuses on the collective unconscious and the archetypes. Moving on. Which technique involves helping clients confront their irrational beliefs? A. Free association, B. Socratic questioning, C. Dream analysis, and D. Token reinforcement. The correct answer here is again B. Socratic questioning is used as guided questions to help clients examine and challenge their irrational beliefs systematically, right? So here we are using some sort of guided questions which are used to examine and challenge. Further, we use it to examine and we use them to challenge the irrational beliefs which a client holds in a systematic manner. So, free association is a psychoanalytic technique, right? Dream analysis is also a psychoanalytic technique. Token reinforcement is behavioral technique. So Socratic questioning is a core CBT technique for challenging the cognitive distortions. All right, the next one, who is considered the founder of logotherapy? So logotherapy was given by Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl developed logotherapy and he focused on finding meaning in life as the primary human motivation. So you need finding meaning in life is the primary motivation as given by Viktor Frankl. So Carl Jung, he founded analytical psychology. So here, this is the incorrect option. Rogers, he developed client-centered therapy. Fritz Perls, he founded the Gestalt therapy. So logotherapy, it emphasizes the search for meaning as the fundamental to human existence. The next question. The concept of self-efficacy is central to which type of therapy? A. Humanistic therapy. B. Psychoanalytic therapy. C. Cognitive behavior therapy. And D. Social cognitive therapy. So here the correct answer is D, which is social cognitive therapy. Now, why is this the correct answer? Because self-efficacy, which was developed by Albert Bandura, it is central to social cognitive approaches that emphasize the beliefs about one's capability to perform behaviors, right? So here, the self-efficacy given by Albert Bandura is the fundamental to the social cognitive therapy. Humanistic therapy focuses on self-actualization, which is not the concept of the social cognitive therapy or self-efficacy. Psychoanalytic therapy focuses on the unconscious conflicts. And CBT focuses on thoughts and behaviors, but not specifically self-efficacy. So, self-efficacy beliefs, they influence motivation, behavior, choice, and even persistence. Okay. The next question. In test development, a pilot study is mainly conducted to A. Finalize the items, B. Assess real-world impact, C. Pre-test and refine items before large-scale use, and D. Diagnosing participants. So the correct answer here is C. Pre-test and refine items before large-scale use. And why is that so? Why do you think that this is the right answer? That is because the pilot studies test the preliminary versions of instruments to identify the problems and refine the items before the full implementation. Here, preliminary versions of instruments are tested to identify the problems and to refine the items before a full implementation. So the finalizing the items, it comes after the pilot study. Assessing the real world impact assessment comes even later. Diagnosis is not the purpose of pilot studies. So pilot studies are essential for identifying and correcting the problems before the full-scale testing. Which of the following is an example of a qualitative research? A. Experimental research. B. Ex post facto research. C. Descriptive survey research. And D. Grounded theory research. So here, grounded theory research is the correct option, because grounded theory is a qualitative methodology that develops theory from systematic data collection and analysis. Here, theory is developed after a systematic collection and analysis of data. Whereas in experimental research, it uses quantitative methods. So here, quantitative methods are used. And ex post facto research is also quantitative. Descriptive survey research typically uses quantitative methods. So grounded theory develops theoretical frameworks from qualitative data analysis. Here, a theoretical framework is also used. Next question. When researchers use designs that call for multiple groups, the most commonly employed test is A. Z-test, B. T-test for difference of means, C. Paired t-test, and D. F-test. So here the correct answer is an F-test, because the F-test is used in ANOVA, which is analysis of variance, to compare means across multiple groups same time, simultaneously, which controls for type 1 error inflation, right? So here it is used to compare multiple means of groups simultaneously, which also helps us in controlling type 1 error inflation. Z-test is for single sample comparisons with known population parameters, right? So here Z-test is for single sample comparisons, that too with known population parameters. T-test compares two groups. And paired t-test compares two related samples. So here F-test is the test that you use for multiple groups. Okay, so they are the F-tests in ANOVA are the standard for comparing multiple group means simultaneously. Moving on. The main characteristic of scientific research is A. Empirical, B. Theoretical, C. Experimental, and D. All of the above. The correct answer here is A. It's empirical. So scientific research is fundamentally empirical, meaning it is based on observable, measurable, and evidence-based rather than theory alone, right? So it is based on observable. It is also based on measurable and it is evidence-based rather than on theory alone. The second option is theoretical. Theoretical refers to the conceptual frameworks. Then it is experimental. So experimental is one type of empirical research only. And the last option is all of the above. It is incorrect since not all research is experimental. So empirical evidence forms the foundation of scientific knowledge. Moving on, which one is called non-probability sampling? A. Cluster sampling, B. Quota sampling, C. Systematic sampling, and D. Stratified random sampling. So here B is the correct answer. Quota sampling is non-probability because participants are selected based on predetermined characteristics rather than random selection. So here participants are selected on a predetermined characteristic rather than instead of random sampling. Cluster sampling is probability based. Systematic sampling is also probability based, and stratified random sampling is probability based as well. So non-probability sampling doesn't give every population member an equal chance of selection. So here non-probability does not give an equal chance of selection. Next question. A researcher conducts a study in a laboratory setting and manipulates the independent variable while controlling the extraneous variables. This is an example of A. A field experiment, B. An archival study, C. A controlled experiment, and D. A naturalistic observation. So here the correct answer is C, which is a controlled experiment. Why is that so? Because laboratory settings with manipulation of variables and controls of extraneous factors define controlled experiments, right? Here it's in a laboratory setting. So it is a controlled experiment. Why? Because the manipulation of variables and there is a control of extraneous factors, the possibility is there. Field experiments, they occur in natural setting. It's difficult to control the variables there. An archival study uses an existing record because you're studying the archives. A naturalistic observation involves no manipulation. Here there is no manipulation. Hence, the controlled experiments, they maximize the internal validity through environmental control. So, it also maximizes the internal validity. 17th. Which of the following research designs is best suited for studying the development of a behavior over time? A. Cross-sectional design, B. Longitudinal design, C. Observational design, and D. Experimental design. So the correct answer is B, which is a longitudinal design, because longitudinal designs follow the same participants over time, allowing the observation of developmental changes, right? So we are following the same participants over time, which would allow us to study the development. Cross-sectional design, it compares different age groups at one time. Observational is a method, not a temporal design. And experimental, it focuses on causation, not development over time. Hence, B is the correct answer, as longitudinal designs are essential for understanding developmental processes and changes over time. Alright, next one. Which of the following is an example of a confounding variable in a research study? A. The gender of the participants. B. The dependent variable. C. The research hypothesis. And D. The research design. So the correct option here is the gender of the participants, which is A. Here, the gender of the participants, if it varies with the independent variable and it affects the dependent variable, then gender can be a confounding variable, right? Because it is varying with the independent variable and it has an effect on the dependent variable. So it is varying with IV and affecting the DV. The dependent variable is what you are measuring. Here, DV is what you are measuring. It is not the confounding variable. The research hypothesis is your prediction. And the research design is the methodology that you take. So here the confounding variables, they threaten the internal validity by providing the alternative explanation for results. It threatens the internal validity because it provides an alternative explanation for the results. Next, which ethical principle requires researchers to protect the participants' privacy and confidentiality? A. Informed consent. B. Confidentiality. C. Beneficence. And D. Justice. So the answer is easy and clear. It is confidentiality. It specifically refers to protecting the participants' private information and maintaining the anonymity. Informed consent is about a voluntary participation. Beneficence is about maximizing the benefits and minimizing harm. Justice is about fair distribution of benefits and the burdens. So confidentiality protection is this essential for maintaining trust and protecting the participants' welfare. So B is the correct option. Now, what is the term for a variable that is manipulated by the researcher? A. Dependent variable. B. Independent variable. C. Confounding variable. And D. Extraneous variable. So the correct answer is independent variable. So the independent variable is the factor that researchers deliberately manipulate to observe its effect on the dependent variable. So here the researcher would manipulate IV. Why? to see and observe its effect on the DV. Dependent variable is, again, as we discussed previously, it's what you measure. Confounding variable is an unwanted influence. Extraneous variable is controlled or eliminated. So, independent variables are the cause in the cause and effect relationships that are being tested. All right. Which among the following is an inferential statistical test for comparing the means of 3 or more groups using a between participants design and an independent variable? A. One-way ANOVA, B. Two-way ANOVA, 3. Three-way ANOVA, and D. Repeated measure ANOVA. So here the correct answer is A, which is one-way ANOVA. And why is this correct? Because one-way ANOVA, it compares the means across multiple independent groups with one independent variable. Here, the means of multiple independent groups, they can be compared with one independent variable. Two-way ANOVA has two independent variables. Here we have 2 IV. Three-way ANOVA has three independent variables. We have 3 IVs. Repeated measure ANOVA uses within subjects design, right? So here the within subjects design is used. So one-way ANOVA is the standard test for comparing multiple independent groups on one factor. That's why it's the correct answer. Now, what statistical test would be used to find correlation with ordinal data obtained from one sample? A. Related t-test, B. Spearman's rank order correlation, C. Kruskal-Wallis, and D. Mann-Whitney. So here the correct option is Spearman rank order correlation. So Spearman's rank order correlation is the non-parametric equivalent of Pearson's correlation, right? So here this is the non-parametric equivalent of Pearson correlation. So this is appropriate for ordinal data. So the incorrect options are related t-test, which compares means, not correlations. The Kruskal-Wallis, it compares multiple groups. And the Mann-Whitney, it compares two independent groups. Okay, so here two independent groups are compared. So the Spearman's correlation is used when data doesn't meet the parametric assumptions or is ordinal. The next question, the F ratio is a result of A. Within groups variance, between groups variance, B. Between groups variance plus within groups variance, C. Between groups variance plus within groups variance, and D. Between groups variance oblique within groups variance. So here the correct answer is D. It's between groups variance and within groups variance. The F ratio compares the systematic variance, which is between groups, to error variance, which is within groups. Alright, so here it compares the systematic variance between groups. So systematic variance between groups to error variance within groups. So A, it has the ratio backwards. That's why it is not the correct answer, because here the ratio is backwards. B, the multiplication is incorrect. C, the addition is incorrect, right? So D is the correct answer, whether group differences exceed what would be expected by chance alone. Alright, so F ratio, what does it indicate? Whether group differences here, whether the group differences would exceed what would be expected by chance alone. Okay. Dr. Colin Cashew allots each of the 96 participants randomly to one of the 4 conditions. As Colin Cashew is very conscientious, he meticulously inspects his histograms and other descriptive statistics and finds that his data is perfectly normally distributed. A. Pearson's R. B. T-test. C. One-way between groups ANOVA, or D. Repeated measures ANOVA. So here the correct answer would be C, which is one-way between groups ANOVA. And why is that so? Because with 96 participants randomly assigned to 4 conditions, this describes a one-way between groups ANOVA design, right? So Pearson's R is for correlation, T-test is for 2 groups only, repeated measures ANOVA would use same participants in all conditions, not in 4 groups. Here it uses same participants in all groups. So random assignment to multiple conditions, it indicates between groups experimental design. So C is the correct answer. How would you describe a 2 into 2 into 4 ANOVA? A. 1 IV with 3 conditions. B. 1 IV with 4 conditions and 1 IV with 2 conditions. C. 1 IV with 4 conditions and 2 IVs with 2 conditions. And D. 1 IV with 16 conditions. So here the correct answer would be C. So this notation indicates 3 independent variables. Here we have 3 independent variables, 1 with 4 levels and 2 with 2 levels. Okay, so A only describes 1 IV. Here only 1 IV is described. B describes only 2 IVs. Here there are only 2 IVs. D incorrectly suggests 1 IV with 16 conditions. So factorial ANOVA notation indicates the number of levels for each independent variable. Alright, hence C is the correct answer. Moving on. A systematic change to an independent variable where the same participants are exposed to different levels of the variable by the experimenter. What procedure is this a glossary definition of? A. Random assignment. B. Within subjects manipulation. C. Between subjects manipulation. And D. Experimental manipulation. So here the correct answer is B, which is within subjects manipulation. Within subjects designs exposes the same participants to all levels of the independent variable. Okay, so here the same participants are exposed to all the levels of independent variables. So random assignment is about group allocation. Between subjects it uses different participants for each condition. So here they are using different participants for each condition. Experimental manipulation is too general. Okay, so within subjects designs control for individual differences, but it risks the order effects. So the correct answer is within subjects manipulation. The next question, the first rating scale was developed by A. Starch, B. Diggory, C. Galton and D. Watson. So the correct answer is Starch. Daniel Starch. So he developed one of the first systematic rating scales for psychological measurement. Diggory worked in other areas. Galton worked on individual differences but not on rating scales. Galton worked on individual differences, not on rating scales. Watson was a behaviorist. So early psychometric developments laid the foundation for the modern psychological assessment. So Watson was behaviorist, hence the correct answer is Daniel Starch. Ex post facto research is a systematic empirical inquiry in which the scientist does not have direct control of A. Dependent variables, B. Independent variables, C. Both independent and dependent variables, and D. Controlled variables. So the correct answer is independent variables. So if in ex post facto research, the independent variables have already occurred and they cannot be manipulated by the researcher. Alright, dependent variables are always measured. They are not controlled. So both variables cannot be controlled in the design. And controlled variables are managed when possible. Hence, independent variables in an ex post facto research, they are the naturally occurring variables that cannot be experimentally manipulated. Okay, moving on. The concept which refers to the consistency of scores obtained by the same person when re-examined with the same test on different occasions is known as A. Error variance, B. Standard error, C. Validity, and D. Reliability. So the correct answer is reliability. The test-retest reliability specifically measures the consistency of scores across time with different administrations. Alright, so here test retest reliability. It measures when the same persons are re-examined with the same test on different administrations. Now, error variance, it refers to measurement error. So here we are looking at measurement error. The standard error is about sampling variability. So this one is the sampling variability. The validity is about measuring what you intend to measure, what it purports to measure, right? So, reliability is essential for consistent psychological measurement across time and conditions. Next question. An experimenter conducts a study in which he wants to look at the effects of altitude on psychological well-being. To do this, she randomly allocates people to two groups and takes one group up in a plane to a height of 1000 meters and leaves the other group in the airport terminal as a control group. When the plane is in the air, she seeks to establish the psychological well-being of both groups. Which of the following is a potential confound threatening the internal validity of the study? A. The reliability of the questionnaire that she uses to establish psychological health. B. The size of the space in which the participants are confined. C. The susceptibility of the experimental group to altitude sickness. D. The susceptibility of the control group to altitude sickness. So here the correct answer is C, which is the susceptibility of the experimental group to altitude sickness. Why is this the correct answer? Because altitude sickness could affect the psychological well-being independent of the altitude variable itself, confounding the results. Okay. So A, the questionnaire reliability affects the measurement quality, but it isn't a confound. This is actually affecting how you are measuring. It is not a confounding variable. So the space confinement, it affects both the groups simultaneously. Won't just affect one. And the control group isn't exposed to altitude. So control group is not exposed to the altitude. So the confounds, they provide the alternative explanations for the observed effects which threatens the internal validity. Hence, C is the correct option. Who believed that the mind was made up of thoughts, experiences, emotions, and other basic elements? A. William Wundt, B. Freud, C. John B. Watson, and D. Carl Rogers. So the correct answer is William Wundt. So Wundt, the founder of experimental psychology, he believed in breaking down the consciousness into basic elements through structuralism. That's why this is the correct answer. Freud focused on the unconscious drives. Watson, he emphasized the observable behavior. And Rogers emphasized the self-concept and growth. So Wundt's structuralism aimed to understand the consciousness by analyzing its component parts. Which Gestalt principle of perceptual organization explains why we tend to group objects that are close together as a single unit? A. Similarity, B. Proximity, C. Closure, and D. Continuity. The correct answer is proximity. Why is this the correct answer? Because the law of proximity states that objects close together in space are perceived as belonging to the same group. Okay, similarity groups objects which look alike. Closure, it fills in the missing information. Continuity, it follows the smooth continuous lines. And the proximity is the fundamental to how we organize the visual information into meaningful patterns. In the context of cognitive learning, what does the concept of latent learning mean? So, A, latent learning only occurs when a reward is immediately provided. B, learning can occur without immediate reinforcement and be demonstrated later. C, learning requires conscious awareness of the stimuli involved. And D, learning is always a result of trial and error behavior. So the correct answer is B. Learning can occur without immediate reinforcement and can be demonstrated later. So latent learning, it occurs without obvious reinforcement and becomes apparent only when there is motivation to demonstrate. First option contradicts the concept. So learning occurs without immediate reward as well. C, the latent learning can occur without conscious awareness also. And D, it is not necessary trial and error behavior. So latent learning demonstrates that reinforcement isn't always necessary for learning to occur. Reinforcement is not always necessary. Which reinforcement schedule provides a reward after an unpredictable number of responses, leading to high and steady response rates? A, fixed ratio schedule. B, variable ratio schedule. C, fixed interval schedule. And D, variable interval schedule. So here the correct answer is B, which is variable ratio schedule, because it produces high steady response rates, because the next response could always be rewarded. So what could be an example over here? Maybe gambling. Fixed ratio schedule has predictable response requirements. So here it is a predictable response requirement. Fixed interval schedule is time-based, not response-based. This is time-based, not response-based. And variable interval is time-based with varying intervals. All right. So this is also time-based with varying intervals. Hence, the correct option is B. So here, variable ratio schedules are most resistant to extinction and they produce consistent responses. So the responses here are a bit more consistent because they are resistant to extinction. Hence, gambling becomes an issue. What terms does use for the process of putting information into a form that can be stored in memory? A, retrieval. B, encoding. C, storage. D, forgetting. So what term does one use for the process of this? Is encoding. B. So encoding is the process of transforming sensory information into a format that can be stored in memory. So the sensory information here can be stored in memory. Alright, so retrieval is getting information out of the memory. Storage is maintaining information in the memory. Forgetting is the loss of stored information, which we often feel just prior to our exams. The correct answer is encoding, which is B. So, what is one reason we forget information as proposed by the interference theory? A. Memories fade because they are not used often. B. New information blocks or mixes with old memories. C. Memories are never encoded properly in the brain. D. Memories are stored in sensory memory too long. So here B, which is new information blocks or mixes with old memories, is the correct answer. So here interference theory, it proposes that forgetting occurs when new information interferes with previously learned information. So option A, this describes decay theory. It does not describe interference theory. Option C describes encoding failure. Option D relates to memory system limitations. So here interference can be proactive, which is the old interfering with the new. Old interfering with new, or retroactive, new interfering with old. So here the correct answer would be B. Moving on, what describes the concept of forgetting curve as described by Ebbinghaus? A. Forgetting happens slowly and evenly over time. B. Most forgetting occurs soon after learning, then slows down. C. Forgetting only happens if information is not rehearsed. And D. Forgetting never occurs for well-learned material. So the correct answer is B, which is most forgetting occurs soon after learning, then slows down. So Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, it shows rapid initial forgetting followed by a more gradual decline. So for A, why is it incorrect? Because forgetting is not linear. It's rapid initially. It is not linear. C, forgetting occurs even with rehearsals, though less. Okay, it would be less, but it would still happen. D, even well-learned material can be forgotten. So, the forgetting curve demonstrates the importance of spaced practice and review. What does it demonstrate? Spaced practice and review. Next, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which level of need must be satisfied before an individual can focus on self-esteem needs? A. Self-actualization needs. B. Safety needs. C. Belongingness and love needs. And D. Physiological needs. So the correct answer here is belongingness and love needs. In Maslow's hierarchy, belongingness and love needs come before the esteem needs in the progression towards self-actualization. So self-actualization is the top of the hierarchy. Safety needs come before. So safety needs come before. Then physiological needs are at the bottom. So here Maslow's hierarchy suggests lower level needs must be satisfied before the higher level needs become more motivating. So Next, in the context of motivation, what does the Yerkes-Dodson law suggest about the relationship between arousal and performance? A. Performance is always highest at the low levels of arousal. B. Performance is unaffected by arousal levels. C. Performance is optimal at a moderate level of arousal. And D. Performance increases linearly with higher arousal levels. So here the correct answer is C. Performance is optimal at a moderate level of arousal. So the Yerkes-Dodson law describes an inverted U-shaped relationship between arousal and performance. So low arousal typically leads to poor performance. Arousal significantly affects the performance. Here, there is a significant effect on the performance. Very high arousal typically impairs performance. It would impair the performance. So, optimal performance requires moderate arousal levels. Too little or too much impairs the functioning. Next question. Which theory of emotion posits that physiological arousal precedes the experience of emotion? A. James Lange theory, B. Cannon-Bard theory, C. Scatter-Singer theory, and D. Cognitive appraisal theory. So the correct answer is James Lange theory. Here, the James Lange theory, it proposes that physiological changes, they occur first and emotional experience follows from these changes. Cannon-Bard theory suggests simultaneous arousal and emotion. Scatter-Singer theory, it emphasizes cognitive interpretation. Cognitive appraisal theory, it emphasizes thought processes. So the James Lange theory, we feel sorry because we cry, afraid because we tremble, right? So here the physiological arousal precedes the experience of emotion. Okay. In the general adaptation syndrome, what stage is characterized by the body's attempt to resist or adapt to a stressor? A. Alarm stage, B. Resistance stage, C. Exhaustion stage, and D. Recovery stage. So the correct answer is resistance stage. Resistance stage is when the body mobilizes the resources to cope with the ongoing stress after the initial alarm reaction. So once the initial alarm reaction has passed, then it is how the body mobilizes the resources to keep with the resource mobilization to cope with the ongoing stress. Alarm stage is the initial stress response. Exhaustion stage occurs when resources are depleted. So recovery stage isn't the part of cell's original model. So the resistance stage shows the body's remarkable ability to adapt to stressors temporarily. That's why resistance stage is the correct answer. Moving on. Which stage of Piaget's cognitive developmental theory is characterized by the development of object permanence in infants? A. Sensory motor stage, B. Pre-operational stage, C. Concrete operational stage, and D. Formal operational stage. So A is the correct answer, which is the sensory motor stage. So object permanence develops during the sensory motor stage, which is from 0 to 2 years. So here the infants learn that objects exist even when it's not visible. So for the infant, if the object is here, it's there in their world. But if it's here, maybe the object is gone, it's lost, it's not there. But during the sensory motor stage, they develop the learning that objects would exist even when they are here. Okay, so pre-operational stage, it involves symbolic thinking. Concrete operational stage involves logical thinking about concrete objects. Formal operational thinking involves abstract reasoning. So the correct answer is the sensory motor stage. So the object permanence is a crucial cognitive milestone. It indicates mental representation abilities. Next question. What term describes the emotional bond that forms between an infant and their primary caregiver? A. Imprinting, B. Attachment, C. Temperament, and D. Social referencing. So the correct answer is attachment. So attachment is the deep emotional bond between an infant and a caregiver. It is crucial for healthy social emotional development. Imprinting is rapid learning in critical periods. Here, imprinting is rapid learning in critical periods. Temperament is individual personality difference. Social referencing is looking to others for emotional cues. Hence, B is the correct answer because secure attachment provides the foundation for healthy relationships throughout the life. Now, according to Erickson's psychosocial developmental theory, what is the primary conflict faced during adolescence? A. Intimacy versus isolation. B. Identity versus role confusion. C. Generativity versus stagnation. And D is integrity versus despair. So the correct answer is identity versus role confusion. Here, adolescents struggle to develop a coherent sense of identity while avoiding role confusion about who they are. The first one, where it says intimacy versus isolation, it occurs in young adulthood. Generativity versus stagnation occurs in middle adulthood. Integrity versus despair occurs in late adulthood. Right, so successful identity formation in adolescence leads to a strong sense of self and direction. Who proposed the balance theory of attitude? Fritz Heider, Leon Festinger, Albert Ellis, or Leon Thurston? So here Fritz Heider is the correct answer, which is A. He developed the balance theory, which explains how people maintain consistency in their attitudes towards objects and other people. So, what does balance theory say? It is the how a person maintains consistency in their attitude towards other person and objects. Leon Festinger developed the cognitive dissonance theory. Albert Ellis developed rational emotive therapy. And Leon Thurston worked on intelligence theory. So, the balance theory explains how attitude change occurs to maintain the cognitive consistency. Moving on. What is the primary purpose of the validity scales in the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory MMPI-2? A. To measure cognitive abilities. B. To detect response biases such as faking or inconsistency. C. To assess unconscious motives. And D. To evaluate intelligence levels. So the correct answer here is B, which is to detect the response biases such as faking or any sort of inconsistency. Okay, so the MMPI-2 validity scales, they identify various responses patterns like lying, defensiveness, or random responding. So the first option is incorrect because clinical scales measure cognitive abilities. C is also incorrect because clinical scales assess unconscious motives. And intelligence test evaluates intelligence levels. All right. So the validity scales ensure the clinical scales provide accurate personality assessment. Hence, B is the correct answer. Moving on. Who proposed the multi-factor theory of intelligence? A. Spearman, B. Lewis Thurston, C. Howard Gardner, and D. Robert Sternberg. So the correct answer is Lewis Thurston. So Thurston proposed that intelligence consists of multiple primary mental abilities rather than a single general factor. Spearman gave the G factor theory. Howard Gardner proposed multiple intelligences theory. Robert Sternberg, he gave the triarchic theory. So Thurston's theory challenged the single intelligence factor. It paved the way for modern theories. Hence, it's the correct option. What is the main purpose of reviewing existing studies in research? A. Collecting original data. B. Finding gaps in current knowledge. C. Drafting the final report. And D. Testing assumptions. B is the correct answer. So literature reviews identify what's already known and what gaps exist. It helps the researchers focus their studies on unexplored areas. Why A is incorrect here? Because collecting original data is the purpose of conducting new research. C is incorrect because drafting the final report comes after the data collection and analysis. D, testing assumptions is part of hypothesis testing. So literature reviews provide the foundation for identifying the research questions and justifying new studies. So which sampling method ensures every population unit has an equal chance of selection? A. Convenience sampling, B. Probability sampling, C. Quota sampling, and D. Judgmental sampling. So here the correct answer is probability sampling. Probability sampling gives every member of the population a known non-zero chance of being selected. It enables the generalization better than any other sampling technique. So a convenience sampling selects easily accessible participants. So here the participants are easily accessible. Coda sampling uses predetermined categories. Judgmental sampling relies on researcher expertise. So, probability sampling is essential for making valid statistical inferences about populations. So, B is the correct answer. Which research design involves manipulating an independent variable to observe its effect on a dependent variable? A. Descriptive design, B. Experimental design, C. Exploratory design, and D. Correlational designs. So the correct answer is experimental design. So experimental design involves deliberate manipulation of variables to establish a cause and effect relationship. So here there is a deliberate manipulation to establish cause and effect. Descriptive design describes phenomenon without manipulation. There is no manipulation here. Exploratory design investigates new areas without manipulation. And then correlational designs, they examine the relationships without manipulation. So here we are looking at relationships without manipulation. So the experimental design is the gold standard for establishing the causal relationship. So B is the correct answer. Okay. In SPSS, which test is used to test the normality of data distribution? A. Frequency analysis, B. Correlation analysis, C. Regression modeling, and D. Shapiro-Wilk test. Here is the correct answer, which is D. So the Shapiro-Wilk test is a statistical test that assesses whether a sample comes from a normally distributed population. Alright, frequency analysis describes data distribution but doesn't test normality. तो ये आपको data distribution तो बता देगा, but it doesn't test normality. Correlational analysis examines the relationships between variables. Regression modeling predicts outcomes from predictors. So it would give outcomes from predictors. So testing normality assumptions is crucial for choosing the appropriate statistical test. Hence, Shapiro-Wilk test is the correct answer. Moving on. Which non-parametric test is used to compare two independent groups when data is not normally distributed? Here, it's Mann-Whitney-U test. So, the Mann-Whitney-U test is the non-parametric alternative to the independent sample t-test. This is non-parametric, but this is an alternative to the independent sample t-test for comparing two groups. So t-test requires normally distributed data. Here The data should be of normal distribution. Hence, this is incorrect. ANOVA is a parametric test and requires normality. Again, parametric test requiring normality. Chi-square test is for categorical data. So here, non-parametric tests are essential when parametric assumptions are not met. Moving on, what does the R squared value in a regression model represent? The proportion of variance in the independent variable explained by the model. B. The proportion of variance in the dependent variable explained by the model. C. The correlation between the dependent and independent variables. And D. The standard error of regression coefficients. So here the correct answer is B. The proportion of variance in the dependent variable explained by the model. So the R squared indicates how much of the variance in the outcome variable is explained by the predictor variables. Okay, so here how much of the variance in the outcome variable is explained by the predictor variables. The first option, why is it incorrect? Because this reverses the relationship. DV variance is explained by IV. This reverses the relationship. Here, DV variance is explained by IV. Why is C incorrect? Because this describes correlation. It is not R squared specifically. And D describes the standard error, not the R squared. So this is the standard error, not the R square error. So the R squared values range from 0 to 1 with higher values indicating better model fit. The next question, what is a type 1 error in hypothesis testing? A. Failing to reject a true null hypothesis. B. Rejecting a true null hypothesis. C. Accepting an alternative hypothesis when it is false. And D. Failing to detect a significant effect in the sample. So the correct option is B, which is rejecting a true null hypothesis. So type 1 error and type 2 error are pretty much commonly asked questions. So here a type 1 error occurs when we conclude there is an effect when there actually isn't one, which is false positive. So A describes correct acceptance of a true null hypothesis. So this is correctly accepted. So it's not the correct option. C describes accepting an alternative hypothesis. So this is not an error type. D, this describes type 2 error. Which is false negative. So type 1 error rate is controlled by setting the alpha level, which is typically 0.05. Next, which research design is best used when the goal is to collect detailed information about a phenomenon in its natural setting without manipulating the variables? A. Experimental design. B. Exploratory design. C. Descriptive design. And D. Quasi-experimental design. The correct answer is Descriptive design. In descriptive research, one observes and documents the phenomena as they naturally occur without intervention. Alright, so you are documenting the phenomenon without any intervention. In an experimental design, manipulation is involved. In an exploratory design, it is more preliminary and less detailed. Quasi experimental design involves some manipulation. So here also some manipulation is involved. So the descriptive research provides a rich detailed information about the real world phenomenon. Okay, what is a key feature of the diathesis stress model? A. Disorders are solely caused by environmental stressors. B. Predisposition interacts with stress to produce a disorder. C. Psychological disorders are entirely genetic. D. Stress has no role in mental disorders. So the correct answer is predisposition interacts with stress to produce a disorder. So, the diathesis stress model proposes that mental disorders result from the interaction between vulnerability, which is the diathesis, and environmental stressors. So here disorders aren't solely caused by environmental factors, hence this is the wrong answer. Disorders aren't entirely genetic, hence this is the incorrect answer, and stress plays a crucial role in the model. Alright, so this is again the wrong option. So the diathesis stress model explains why not everyone exposed to stress develops the disorders. So, which sampling method ensures that every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected? A. Convenience sampling, B. Random sampling, C. Stratified sampling, D. Purposive sampling. So, answer is very simple. It is random sampling, which is B. Random sampling gives each population member an equal probability of selection, ensuring representativeness. First, convenience sampling is the wrong answer because it selects easily accessible participants. Stratified sampling divides population into subgroups first. So it is again the wrong answer. And purposive sampling selects specific types of participants. So random sampling is the fundamental to making valid generalizations from samples to populations. Hence, B is the right answer. Who is the father of experimental psychology? A. William Wundt, B. Sigmund Freud, C. C.G. Jung, D. E.B. Titchener. Correct answer is William Wundt. He established the first psychology laboratory in 1879 and is considered the founder of experimental psychology. Freud talked about psychoanalysis. Jung developed analytical psychology, and Titchener was one student who brought structuralism to America. Okay, so the correct answer is William Wundt. Now, who is a famous psycholinguistic? A. Gardner, B. Simon, C. Noam Chomsky, and D. Alan Newell. So the correct answer is Noam Chomsky. Here, Chomsky revolutionized psycholinguistics with his theories of universal grammar and innate language acquisition. Alright, so we all know that the innate language acquisition was made popular and theories of universal grammar were also made popular by Noam Chomsky. So Gardner is known for multiple intelligence theory. Simon worked on artificial intelligence and cognitive psychology. Alan Newell worked on artificial intelligence as well. So Chomsky's work transformed understanding of language acquisition and cognitive development. The first psychological laboratory was established in India at A. Delhi University, B. Calcutta University, C. Bombay University, or D. Banaras Hindu University. So the answer is Calcutta University. So the first laboratory in India was established at Calcutta University, marking the beginning of scientific psychology in India. Next question. The most pioneered contributor to behavioral school of psychology is A. Freud, B. Alport, C. Watson, D. Fechner. The correct answer is Watson. So here, John B. Watson, he founded behaviorism and he emphasized the study of the observable behavior rather than the consciousness. Okay, so Freud found psychoanalysis, Alport worked on the personality theory, and Fechner worked on psychophysics. So here the correct answer is Watson. The next question, the degree of attraction among group members relates to the dimension of A. Cohesiveness, B. Compatibility, C. Structure, and D. Conformity. So here the correct answer is A. Cohesiveness. So the group cohesiveness refers to the strength of the bonds and the attraction amongst group members. So here we are looking at the strength of the bonds and attraction among group members. Compatibility refers to how well members work together. Structure refers to group organization and roles. Conformity refers to the behavior change due to group pressure. So the cohesive groups show better performance, satisfaction, and member retention. So here the correct answer is A. Solomon Asch's classic experiment, in which subjects judged a standard line and comparison lines, was arranged to test the limits of A. Social perception, B. Indoctrination, C. Coercive power, and D. Conformity. So here the correct answer is conformity. So Asch's line judgment experiments demonstrated how people conform to group opinions even when obviously they are incorrect. So social perception is broader than conformity. B involves systematic belief change. Coercive power involves force or maybe threats. So Asch's experiments revealed the powerful influence of group pressure on individual judgment. So D is the correct answer. The study of unspoken rules for the use of interpersonal space is called kinesics. B. Psychoecology. C. Proxemics. And D. Territoriality. So here the correct answer is proxemics. So proxemics studies how people use and perceive space in interpersonal relationships. Why A is incorrect? Because kinesics is the study of body language. Psychoecology isn't a standard term. The territoriality is about space ownership, not interpersonal distance. So proxemic behavior varies significantly across cultures and influences the communication effectiveness. Hence, this is the correct answer. Moving on. Someone asks you to bring dip to a party and you agree. Later, the person asks you also to bring popcorn, chips, and sodas. The person has used which compliance strategy? A. The lowball technique. B. The overcommitment strategy. C. The whole part technique. And D. The passive obedience method. So the correct answer is the lowball technique. So the lowball technique involves getting initial agreement to a small request, then increasing the demands after the commitment. So you start with a small request, and once the person agrees, you make a bigger request. Overcommitment strategy isn't a recognized compliance technique. So the whole part technique isn't either a recognized technique, and the passive obedience method isn't a compliance strategy anyways. So the low ball technique exploits the commitment consistency. People tend to honor commitments even when conditions change. Expected behavior patterns associated with particular social positions are called A. Mannerisms, B. Roles, C. Culture, and D. Stereotypes. The correct answer is roles. So, social roles are sets of expectations about how people in particular positions should behave. Mannerisms are individual behavioral habits. Culture is a broader shared belief and practice. Stereotypes are oversimplified generalizations about groups. So, role expectations, they guide behavior and create predictability in social interactions. Now, the next question. In order to understand the Rogers theory, one needs to understand which of the following? The self-concept, the organism, the development of self, or all of them. So, the correct answer is the organism. So, here Rogers theory centers on the organism, who is the whole person. And their subjective experience. And also self-concept. So self-concept is a part of, but not the whole foundation. It is a part, not whole. The development of self is an outcome, not a foundational concept. And all of them is too broad to even consider. So Rogers emphasized the holistic view of the person as an integrated organism seeking growth. According to Sartre, existentialism is a doctrine intended strictly for all people, specialists and philosophers, Europeans or atheists. So the answer is all people. Okay, so Sartre believed that existentialism was a universal human philosophy. It was about freedom, choice, and responsibility. So it was for all the people. Specialists and philosophers would limit its universal applicability. Europeans would be culturally restrictive, and atheists would exclude religious individuals. So, existentialism addresses the fundamental human concerns about meaning, freedom, and responsibility. Now, a sexual attachment towards one of the parents of the opposite sex with a concomitant jealousy towards the other parent is popularly known as A. Oedipus complex, B. Fixation, C. Narcissism, and D. Libido. So the correct answer is A. So the Oedipus complex describes a child's unconscious sexual desire for the opposite sex parent and rivalry with the same sex parent. What is fixation? Being stuck at a developmental stage. Narcissism, excessive self-love. Libido is sexual energy in general. So the Oedipus complex is central to the Freudian psychoanalytic theory of personality of development. Hence, A is the correct answer. According to Gray, there are two types of personalities, specifically A. Those that are repelled by positive stimuli and that are attractive to negative stimuli. B. Those that are attracted to rewarding stimuli and those that tend to avoid aversive stimuli. C. Those that are motivated by greed and those that are motivated by altruism. D. Those that believe in simple binary divisions of personality and those that do not. So the correct answer is B. Why is this the correct answer? Because Gray's theory proposes behavioral approach system. This behavioral approach system, abbreviated as BAS. And it also proposes behavioral inhibition system. Also talking about behavioral inhibition system, BIS. So these two are the personality dimensions. Option A reverses the typical approach avoidance pattern. Here this is reversing the approach avoidance pattern. Option C, greed versus altruism isn't Gray's personality theory. And option D, this criticized the binary thinking rather than describing it. So this is also the wrong option. So Gray's reinforcement sensitivity theory, it links personality to the neurobiological systems. Alright, so these two are what you need to remember. Next, the tendency whereby a group reaches a decision by trying to minimize conflict, neglecting to critically test and evaluate ideas is termed A. Group compromise, B. Group consensus, C. Group think, and D. Group cohesion. So here The correct answer is groupthink. Why? Because groupthink occurs when group harmony becomes more important than the critical evaluation of the alternatives. So, A, group compromise involves negotiation, not uncritical agreement. It's the wrong option. Group consensus can be healthy when properly achieved, and group cohesion is about attraction, not decision making flaws. So, groupthink can lead to poor decisions due to suppression of dissent and critical thinking. So, groupthink is the correct answer. Which technique of reliability assessment involves testing the same group of people on two separate occasions? A. Coefficient alpha. B. Split half method. C. Test retest method. And D. Scorer reliability. So the correct answer is the test retest method. Here, the reliability measures the consistency of scores when the same test is administered twice to the same people. Coefficient alpha, what does it do? Measures internal consistency. Split half method divides test items into two halves. Scorer reliability measures the consistency between different raters. Hence, test retest method is the correct option, where reliability is crucial for ensuring the psychological tests which provide the stable measurements over time. Which of the following statistics is not permissible in an ordinal scale? A. Median, B. Quartile deviation, C. Percentile, and D. Standard deviation. So the correct answer is standard deviation. Standard deviation requires the interval or the ratio data because it involves arithmetic operations with the actual numerical values. So here we are looking at either the interval or we are looking at the ratio data. So median is appropriate for ordinal data. Quartile deviation is appropriate again for ordinal data. Percentile is appropriate for ordinal data. But standard deviation has interval or ratio data. Which one of the following scales of measurement has absolute zero? Nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? So the correct answer is ratio. Ratio scales have a true 0 point that represents complete absence of the measured attribute. It has a true 0 point. Nominal scales, they only categorize the data. Ordinal scales only rank order the data. Interval scales have equal intervals but no true zero. So here ratio scales allow all mathematical operations including meaningful ratio between values. So it's the correct answer. Duncan's multiple range test, Newman-Kuhl's test, Toki's HST test and Sheffey's test can be used only when F ratio is not significant, F ratio cannot be determined, F ratio is significant, T ratio is not significant. So the correct answer is F ratio is significant. So the post hoc tests are only appropriate after finding a significant omnibus F test in ANOVA. Okay, so A is incorrect because non-significant F ratio means no group differences. So here we have no group differences to explore. Now, F ratio cannot be determined. So, inability to determine F ratio prevents ANOVA analysis. So, here ANOVA analysis becomes difficult. T ratio is not significant, isn't relevant for these post hoc tests. So, this is not relevant for post hoc tests. So, the post hoc tests control the type 1 error when making multiple pairwise comparisons after ANOVA. So, this is the correct answer. Selection of every 15th item from a list of sample is called simple random sampling, systematic sampling, purposive sampling, or random sampling. So, here the correct answer is systematic sampling. So, systematic sampling involves selecting every kth item from a list where k is determining by dividing the population size by desired sample size. Okay, so here the first option is incorrect because simple random sampling uses random selection without systematic intervals. So here without systematic intervals, hence this is the incorrect option. Purposive sampling selects specific types of participants. Here specific types of participants are selected. Random sampling is a broader category. So, systematic sampling is efficient but can introduce a bias if there are patterns in the population list. The answer is B. One of the following is not a parametric test: sign test, T test, ANOVA, or F test. So, it is sign test, which is the correct option, because the sign test is a non-parametric test that doesn't assume normal distribution or interval or ratio data. It is a non-parametric test. T-test is a parametric test assuming normal distribution. ANOVA is a parametric test assuming normal distribution and homogeneity. F-test is parametric. It is used in ANOVA and regression. So, non-parametric tests are used when parametric assumptions are not met. So, shortly after this session, we will be joined by Dr. Milan, who would help you with the answer key of the biopsychology questions of the MPhil entrance examination. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Dr. Milan Arora. I am your faculty at Conceptual Psychology. Okay, so we are here taking up biopsychology questions from this MPhil exam that had occurred. These are recall-based questions. We will try to understand the demand of the question, why we chose a particular answer, and why did not we choose the rest of the options. Okay, so one by one we will see what questions were asked. So the question 1 is, which of the following neurotransmitter plays a key role in memory, arousal and attention? So it is asking us about memory, arousal and attention. Fine. So what are the options? Serotonin, acetylcholine, GABA and dopamine. Okay. So let's discuss one by one. So everyone knows about serotonin. What function does serotonin play in the body? It has a role in mood regulation, or to be more precise, emotional regulation. Okay. Now let's check with our question. Does the question demand mood or emotions? No, it is saying that it wants memory, arousal and attention. Okay, so serotonin cannot be the answer here. because serotonin is a key player in mood regulation or emotional regulation. That is why it is conceptualized in the monoamine theory that when serotonin level goes down in the body, then depression occurs. Okay, this is a theory. Fine. Then coming to the option number C, do you know about GABA? What is GABA? GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. In body, we have two types of neurotransmitters, excitatory and inhibitory. Excitatory is one which will stimulate us. Okay, like the example of excitatory neurotransmitter is glutamate. Here, the option is GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and inhibitory neurotransmitter will cause what? It will inhibit the processes. So it will cause relaxation. Okay, so is the question asking about relaxation? No, it is saying arousal, attention, which are some tasks which need something excitatory. So inhibitory neurotransmitter cannot be the answer. Okay, then comes to two options. One is acetylcholine, other is dopamine. So dopamine, have you heard about dopamine? Okay, so dopamine, what is the main role? Dopamine has three main roles: motivation, energy, and reward. Motivation, energy, and reward. Basically, dopamine is the reward. The reward pathway of the body is based on dopamine. Fine. So here, if it would have talked about reward or addiction, then the answer would have been dopamine. But here you see, it is talking only about memory, attention, arousal, and attention. Fine. So the answer is acetylcholine. And remember, acetylcholine, the key function is memory. You must have heard about a disease named as Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's. What is the basic pathology in Alzheimer's? Why does Alzheimer occur? Tell me. So in brain, we have an area. Okay, you need not remember the name now in this video. When we study the neuroanatomy, we'll make you learn. So brain has an area named as entorhinal cortex. Okay, in this entorhinal cortex, there is another area, okay, which is known as substantia innominata. Please do not try to learn the name as of now. Okay, this area contains many cholinergic neurons. Cholinergic neurons. Cholinergic neurons means there is a collection of nerves which bring acetylcholine, and this place we have a lot of acetylcholine collected. Fine. What happens in Alzheimer's is this place gets distorted. So what is getting distorted in Alzheimer's? This acetylcholine nerve fibers, this acetylcholine chemicals are getting distorted. So in Alzheimer's, the acetylcholine decreases. And what is the prominent issue of Alzheimer's? Tell me. Everyone knows it is forgetfulness. And why forgetfulness? Because memory. Because acetylcholine is not there, memory formation is not correct, so the patient presents with forgetfulness. Fine. I hope now you can correlate serotonin, mood, depression. So serotonin is your mood regulator, depression. Acetylcholine, memory, Alzheimer's. Dopamine, reward, addiction. If you remember this table, you will solve a lot of MCQs from this table itself. Okay. When we go into the neuroanatomy in conceptual psychology, we are going to deal with the neuroanatomy. Starting from the very basic, we will build on the basics. Okay, and then these things will get very easy for you. Okay, you will not have to learn it because these will get integrated in your brain itself. Fine. So this is the first question that we have tackled with. Coming to the second question. So second question is, which brain structure is most responsible for our balance, posture, and muscle tone? Okay, so it is asking about balance, posture, and tone. So see, what is balance? If I am able to walk, okay, it can be balance. If I am able to walk in a straight line, it can be balance. if I know where my hands are, where my legs are, and I am not feeling unstable or dizzy, that is balance. Okay. If I can close my eyes and touch my nose with this finger, index finger, this is also balance. Okay. This is also balance. Fine. So it is asking that which brain area is responsible for balance, posture, and muscle tone. So we'll be focusing on balance only here. Okay. Fine. Tell me, you must know that where is medulla? Medulla is in the hind brain. Hind brain. Fine. Medulla is in the hind brain. So you must know that medulla and pons, two options. These medulla and pons are part of hind brain. And what is their function? They have important areas. Important areas means the vital areas for life. Vital areas of life. That is, they have a respiratory center. The because how can we breathe? Because our medulla and pons are functioning. Okay, so therefore we can breathe. They have our autonomic centers. What do you mean by autonomic centers? Autonomic centers means the ones which control your heart rate, the ones which control your blood pressure. Okay, so medulla and pons cannot be the answer because they are handling the most important or the vital areas. So they are not responsible for balance, posture, and muscle tone. Now we are left with two options. One is reticular formation and other is cerebellum. So once we read sleep, you will hear this word reticular formation. This reticular formation, please remember, is associated with what is its function? Its function is as it is associated with sleep wake cycle. Mainly it helps in the wakefulness. Wakefulness. It keeps our body alert. It keeps our body alert. While I am speaking, while I am learning, while I am teaching, my body is alert. I am not feeling dizzy. I am not feeling sleepy because my reticular formation is active. So remember, reticular formation is area which is dealing with sleep wake cycle. Okay, when we have to sleep, when the reticular formation goes off, we sleep. When the reticular formation is active, we come back to wakefulness or we come in an alert state. So reticular formation is sleep wake cycle. Now we are left with the option that is cerebellum. So cerebellum is responsible for balance, posture, and muscle tone. Just remember, if you have to check is the cerebellum intact or not, one thing is you do this. This is known as past pointing. First, you have to tell the patient to touch his index finger, right hand index finger to the tip of the nose. First, with his eyes open. Okay, when his eyes are open, the sensory input is there. Sensory input means that I can see where my finger is going, and then I can, if I feel that it is swaying, I can bring it back. Okay, but once I close my eyes, the sensory input, I cannot see anything. Now, if my cerebellum is disturbed, if my finger is swaying away, I will not be able to bring it back. Okay, okay. So that is cerebellum. That is how you check cerebellum. First thing. Second, why are we able to do this rapid alternating movements? We can put our hands in prone and supine, any position. Okay. Why can we do this? Because our cerebellum is intact. Okay, the coordination is there. Coordination is there. We are able to maintain the posture. Okay, so if there is a person whose cerebellum is not intact, what will happen? His this rapid alternating movements of hands will go, and this is known as dysdiadochokinesia. Okay, once we delve into the neuroanatomy, we will learn this as well. Fine. So if someone asks you which brain area responsible for balance, posture, and muscle tone, clear cut answer here should be cerebellum. Not much doing. Okay, the first two questions I would say were relatively easy. Comes the third. So Wernicke's area is connected to Broca's area by a bundle of nerve fibers called. Okay, so for this question you must have a basic understanding of the brain. So you should know that inside the brain, you have something known as Broca's area, you have something known as Wernicke's area, and these are connected also by some nerve fibers. So how the attachment is there? So anytime you draw brain, the first structure that you draw is this. This is what? This is your central sulcus. See, this is brain. If I put my brain in my hands, so let's say this is brain. Okay, so this brain is connected from the center. Brain is two halves, na? One is the right half, one is the left half. So I am showing you like this. Okay, this is brain. Now what I have done is, the diagram that I have drawn is, I have cut brain from here. Okay, I have cut brain from here, and then I have tilted it like this. So you are seeing the external surface of the brain. External surface of the brain you are seeing. Okay, and when you see the external surface of the brain, there is a very deep central sulcus. There is a very deep central sulcus which divides what? Which divides our frontal lobe. The thing in front of central sulcus, when you are looking from that direction, on the lateral surface, the thing in front of central sulcus is frontal lobe. The thing behind the central sulcus is parietal lobe. Okay, and here, somewhere in the center here, you have this. This is sylvian sulcus. Please do not get disinterested by the names. Once we learn neuroanatomy, we will learn everything. Okay, so we have frontal lobe, parietal lobe. Okay, these are demarcated or delineated by the central sulcus. Then frontal lobe is separated from the temporal lobe by the sylvian sulcus. Okay, now you understand. Now you understand. In the frontal lobe, I have Broca's area, and in the temporal lobe, I have Wernicke's area, and both of these areas are responsible for my speech. See, what I have to speak. Okay, this my Broca's and Wernicke's areas are thinking. Okay, if any one of those gets hampered, either I will speak jargon. Okay, like no one will be able to understand, or I will not speak at all. Okay, so if those get affected, what happens is, because these both areas are connected, because they have to work in tandem, they have to work with each other, so they are connected with a bundle of nerve fibers. Okay, this bundle of nerve fibers is known as, arcuate fasciculus. Arcuate fasciculus. And this arcuate fasciculus, what is the function of arcuate fasciculus? It is repetition. Repetition. Okay, fine. Now understand two things here. My Broca's area helps in producing speech. Producing speech. Okay. My Wernicke's area helps in comprehension. Comprehension or understanding what I have to speak. Okay. And my arcuate fasciculus, this area, helps in repetition. So now I know, if a person has come to me who is not able to speak, that is, he is not able to produce speech, I know which part has gone. It is Broca's area. Okay, let's say there is another person who is speaking something. I asked him, what is your name? And he says, tiger is in the house. So he is speaking something, but what is happening? His comprehension is impaired. He is not able to understand my question. So I know his Wernicke's areas is gone. Okay. But there are certain cases in which the person is able to produce the speech also, is able to understand also, but is not able to do repetition. He cannot repeat. Okay. Then we say that arcuate fasciculus is gone. So for your understanding, please remember a line diagram. In the frontal lobe, you have Broca's area. In the temporal lobe, you have Wernicke's area. They are connected by arcuate fasciculus. Okay. Broca is motor speech area. Wernicke is sensory speech area. Motor speech area will produce speech. Sensory area, that is Wernicke's area, it is for comprehension. Understanding what I have to speak. And this arcuate fasciculus is for repetition. So depending on which symptom the patient presents with, I am able to know that which kind of, where the lesion is, which kind of aphasia I am dealing with. Fine, understood? Okay. Now let's see the options. So we have arcuate fasciculus in the option, clear cut answer. Okay. Okay. What is corpus callosum? I told you na, let's see, this is the brain, this is the left half and this is the right half. This left half is joined with the right half of the brain via what? Via a band, and this band is what? Corpus callosum. Fine? Understood corpus callosum? Okay. Then central sulcus. Central sulcus. Central sulcus has a very important role, not going into the details as such, but you have to understand that central sulcus, for us, it serves as an anatomical landmark of differentiating frontal lobe and parietal lobe. You can remember this much at this time. Okay. Cingulate gyrus. Cingulate gyrus is present on the medial surface. What I was showing you was the lateral surface. If I cut the brain, and I am showing you the outer surface, that is the lateral surface. No, now what I am doing is I am cutting the brain and showing you this surface of the brain, that is the inside surface, medial surface. I will find the cingulate gyrus. So cingulate gyrus is present on the inside surface, okay. And cingulate gyrus is, the role is in mood regulation or emotion regulation, okay. Understood? Understood all the options? Fine. Coming to the next question. Next question is, which stress response system involves the release of cortisol to prepare the body for prolonged challenge? See, this is important. Prolonged challenge. This is the catch in the question. Okay. See, whenever there is a stress to the body, understand what happens. Whenever there is a stress to the body, there are two phases. Acute phase, the immediate phase, like there is a dog running after me, okay. So there is one phase which is the immediate phase where I have to run for my life or I have to fight with the dog. So in the acute phase, I either have to fight or I have to flight. Either I have to fight the dog or I have to run away. Fight or flight. And when body is in this state, fight or flight state, our sympathetic nervous system gets activated. Our sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and the main hormones of sympathetic nervous system are adrenaline and norepinephrine or noradrenaline. Adrenaline or noradrenaline. And these play a major role in our stress response. Okay. But remember, this is in the acute phase. Okay. And the question is asking prolonged challenge. That is why they have given it as option 1. That if you miss this, you read stress response, you read challenges, you will mask sympathetic system and the question will go wrong. No. In the acute phase, fight or flight phase, our sympathetic system is activated and the hormone released are epinephrine, norepinephrine, which are also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. Fine. And the body fights or flights the stress. What happens in the chronic phase? If there is certain stress which is lingering on for days or months. So in chronic stress, what happens is, in the brain there is a structure known as hypothalamus, which sends certain hormone to pituitary. Pituitary further sends these hormones to the adrenal gland, which is located on the kidney. Okay. And from the adrenal gland, there is a release of hormone. Okay. So now let's fill in the blanks. Hypothalamus sends corticotrophin releasing hormone to pituitary. It gives the signal to pituitary to release what? ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Okay. This adrenocorticotropic hormone will go to adrenal gland and it will ask the adrenal gland to release what? To release the hormones which are present in the adrenal gland, and which is the stress hormone. There are 3 hormones which are present in the adrenal gland: glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids and sex steroids. Here we are not talking about mineralocorticoids and sex steroids, we are talking about stress response. So ACTH will ask the adrenal gland to release what? Glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids is what? Cortisol. Cortisol. Okay, so now read the question. Which stress response system involves the release of cortisol? So I told you that release of cortisol is occurring. And which system is involved? Is it sympathetic system that is involved? No. Did I talk about parasympathetic? No. Did I talk about autonomic nervous system? No. I talked about HPA, adrenal, HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Fine. Understood? So this HPA axis is the answer for you. HPA axis is the answer for you. The catch in the question was prolonged challenge, chronic stress. Fine. Understood? Let's move to another question. Okay. Which of the following brain region is responsible for higher level cognitive function like planning and decision making? Very simple question. Planning and decision making are functions of our brain. Okay. If I talk on a very crude level, how do I plan and how do I take decision? Due to my brain. Okay. And what is the most abundant part of the brain? Okay. There are 4 lobes in the brain: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. 4 lobes in the brain. So occipital lobe function is in vision. Okay, vision, occipital lobe, which is in the behind of the brain, vision. Temporal and parietal lobe, these are mainly for features like calculation, visuospatial abilities, etc. Okay, which area is for planning and decision making? That is frontal lobe. That is frontal lobe. And you must remember that why are we humans? How are we different from animals? Because we can plan and make decisions. Okay, we can take our own decisions. So this frontal lobe is the one which makes us human. Okay, and the frontal lobe is the largest part of the brain. Largest part of the brain. Okay, so clear cut answer is frontal lobe. There is nothing to think about or nothing to ponder here and there. See, cerebellum, we know balance, posture, tone. Understood? Occipital lobe, I have told you the role is vision. Occipital lobe, vision. Occipital lobe, vision. Medulla oblongata, we have seen vital centers are present. It is giving us life. We are breathing because of medulla. Okay, okay. So but planning and decision making is frontal lobe. Okay, fine. Let's move on to another question. What is name of the gap between neurons where communication occurs? Okay, so this is one question which is very basic for the neuroanatomy. So we are saying that this is neuron 1 and this is neuron 2. Okay, and the signal is being transferred from neuron A to neuron B. Okay, but there is a gap, visible gap I see. What is the name of this gap? Okay, I want the name of this gap. Let's for this na, you need to understand the structure of a neuron. So neuron has cell body, this is its body. Then it has this long tail which is known as axon. Okay, then it has this tentacles like structure which catch the signal. These are known as dendrites. Okay, then this is the end. Okay, this is the end of the neuron known as telodendrias. Okay, okay, and then it gives the signal to another neuron. Now before giving the signal, this signal which was coming here, this is caught by dendrites, goes to the cell body, travels from the axons, and then it reaches the ends. Okay, and then it travels this gap and reaches another neurons, and then it is passed further. Okay, okay. Sometimes these neurons are covered by a layering. This layering is what? Myelin sheath. Myelin sheath. Fine, fine. But our question is, what is this gap known as? This gap is known as synapse or the synaptic cleft. Synapse or the synaptic cleft. Very basic question if you are well aware with the neuroanatomy of the nerve. So it is a basic question. So it cannot be axon. Axon is what? Axon is this part. Dendrite is the tentacle like area which are there for catching the incoming signals. And the myelin sheath is the covering of the axon. Okay, so synapse. This gap is the synapse. Understood? Now, okay. Next question is, which brain wave pattern is associated with deep sleep? Okay. So brain wave pattern, that is they are talking about EEG finding. These beta, alpha, delta, gamma waves. So you must know what is happening. So when, let's say this is me. Now currently I am teaching, I am active, my brain is functioning. Okay. When my brain is active and I do EEG, which brain wave I will get? Alpha? No, beta. So in the active state, when I am thinking, when I am doing calculation, when I am using my brain, the brain wave is beta. Fine? Okay. Now let's say after my class, I am tired and now I go to bed. But I have just gone to bed, I have not slept, I have just gone to bed and closed my eyes. Okay? Okay? So I am in an early sleep phase. Okay? Or a relaxed state, I would say. A relaxed state. Now if you do EEG, which brain wave do you expect? Now it will be alpha wave. Okay, because my brain has started to relax. Okay, alpha wave. Okay, now 2 hours later, when I am in deep sleep, and now you do EEG, then my brain will be very slow, and that wave is known as the delta wave. Okay, and how are these waves visible? See, in the EEG, what is EEG? We apply one electrode here, and like ECG is there, the charting is done on a paper. Similarly, we see charting on the screen, and then we can take it out on a paper also. So what happens is, so when we apply the electrode, it catches the electrical activity of my brain. So here, when I am teaching you, electrical activity of brain is high. That is why beta waves, what is the frequency? How many waves are there in 1 second? What is the frequency? It is 10 to 30. 10 to 30. Somewhere you will find 13 to 30 also. Okay? Okay, 10 to 30 or 13 to 30, whatever you reference you want, you can take. Okay, now what happens is, when I go home and I relax means my brain activity has reduced. That is why alpha wave will be 8 to 10 hertz. Okay, and when I am in deep sleep, my brain will be very slow. That is why it is 0.5 to 4 hertz. So if they ask me deep sleep, which brain wave? So deep sleep, delta wave. Simple. Okay. Beta wave, active. Alpha wave, relaxed. Deep sleep, delta wave. Now we are left with gamma wave. See, gamma wave, it is not generally found, but when the brain is hyperactive. Okay, let's say there is a dog who is running behind me again. So hyperactive, gamma waves. Okay, more than 30. Some say it reaches up to 100 hertz as well. Okay, fine. So if you have to draw a table, you can draw like this: alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Alpha is relaxed state, beta is active state, gamma is you can draw like delta and gamma. It will become easy. Delta and gamma. Delta is deep sleep, gamma is hyperactive. Okay, so it is alpha wave is 8 to 10, 10 to 30, 0.5 to 4, and more than 30. So if you make this table, if you remember this table, you will be able to solve any MCQ that comes from this brain, sleep, and EEG patterns. Fine? Okay. Moving to next question. Which neurotransmitter is associated with reward and motivation? We have covered this. It is dopamine. In the first question only, I told you GABA, inhibitory neurotransmitter, not involved in reward, serotonin for mood, acetylcholine for memory. So what is left for reward and motivation? Dopamine. Dopamine. Okay. So this becomes easy when you know certain facts. You are able to solve at least 3 or 4 questions from that. Okay. Next question is, people suffering from color blindness fail to distinguish which of two colors. Okay. So it is asking us which is the most common color blindness. In short, it is asking most common color blindness. Okay. You see that this is eye. Eye has two types of cells. One is rods, other is cones. Rods are responsible for vision. Cones are responsible for color. I am able to see or not is the function of rods. If I am able to see what color is it, okay, then this is function of cones. Then this is function of cones. Here we are talking about color only. So cones will be affected. Cones will be affecting. But he is not asking which pigment is affecting. He is asking people suffering from color blindness will not be able to differentiate between which two colors. So basically most common color blindness. This is a factual question. You have to remember this is red and green. Okay. So this is a factual question. You can remember most common color blindness is red and green. Okay. Deuteranopia. Fine. Now comes another question. Reflexes are usually controlled by hypothalamus, medulla, spinal cord, frontal lobe. See. Just remember, any reflex will not go into brain. So any part of the brain just rule out. Hypothalamus, is it in brain? Yes. Medulla, is it in brain? Yes. Frontal lobe, is it in brain? Yes. So answer will be spinal cord. Now you understand the concept. Let's say this is a hot pan. Okay. I have just woke up from my sleep and I don't know that this is a hot pan. What I do, I touch it. My finger is here. If my reflexes were to go in brain, what will happen? The signal of hot, this pan being hot, will travel from my finger, will go to the hand, to the brain, and from brain one area, second area, third area, and then it will come back from my hand, and then it will come to my finger and say, okay, remove the finger. Then I will remove. But by this time, my finger would have been burnt. So what happens is, when we are talking about reflexes, the reflexes go into the spinal cord. They take a shorter path. Okay, my finger touches, the nerves will take it to the spinal cord, and spinal cord is here. Okay, so it will immediately return and say, remove your finger, and I will remove my finger without my finger being burnt. Okay, so shorter path. Because we need reflex, you understand, reflex. So we have to do it immediately. If the circuit goes into the brain, it will take a lot of time. Okay, fine, understood. So this question can be done very easily. If you know that the reflexes do not go into the brain, then you can do it very easily. Only option is spinal cord. Fine. So coming to the next question, a part of the brain that sends signals alert to higher centers of the brain in response to incoming messages. So it is asking which part of the brain is a alertness center. So alertness center. Okay. Alertness center, we can see that there are close options. Why close? I will tell you. Okay. Just remember, hippocampus cannot be the answer. Hippocampus is for memory. Limbic system cannot be the answer. It is for emotions. Now comes confusion between amygdala and reticular formation. Not a confusion as such, just to clarify. See, our emotions are what we see. Stress dependent emotions are processed in amygdala. We know that. Okay, and that makes our brain alert. But that does not make amygdala the alertness center. The part of the brain which is responsible for wakefulness and alertness is reticular formation, is reticular formation. So why I am sitting, why I am not sleeping while teaching you? Because I am alert at this moment, because my reticular formation is active, because my reticular formation is active. Fine, fine. This is there. Now, what is the correct sequence of an auditory stimulus to reach the primary auditory cortex? Okay, so this is asking the auditory pathway. Okay, very easy. Auditory pathway is nothing. I hear a sound from outside. What will happen? The sound will come to my eardrum, external ear. From external ear, it will go to middle ear. Middle ear. There is something known as middle ear, and beneath, basically medially to middle ear, we have the inner ear. Inner ear contains what? Inner ear contains our eighth nerve, which is vestibulocochlear nerve, or the auditory nerve, the nerve which carries the signal of hearing. You are hearing my voice because my voice is being carried by that particular nerve to your brain. So the signal is being carried by that nerve to the brain, and then the brain processes what I am saying and then tells you. Okay, so the starting point is eighth nerve. Okay, so we'll see all the options. Here the starting is eighth nerve, cochlear nuclei. Yes. Here also starting is cochlear nuclei. Here it is superior olive. No. Here it is medial geniculate nucleus. No. Okay, so we know that the starting point is eighth nerve. So something related to cochlear we have to start with. So cochlear nerve we start with. After this, just remember, once you remember eighth nerve, then you remember the mnemonic SLIM. SLIM. The signals will go to superior olive. Then they will go to lateral lemniscus. Lateral lemniscus, not medial lemniscus, lateral lemniscus. Okay. Then they will go to inferior colliculus. Then they will go to inferior colliculus, and then they will go to medial geniculate body. Medial geniculate body. Okay. So medial geniculate body. Medial geniculate body. Understood? That you have to remember this mnemonic will work for you. SLIM. Okay. Once the sound is coming from the surrounding, who will catch it? External ear. External ear will give it to middle ear. Middle ear will give it to inner ear. In the inner ear, we have eighth nerve. Eighth nerve will carry the signal to the brain. Ultimately, from the medial geniculate body, it will easily reach the auditory cortex. Okay, but from the first point, that is your eighth nerve, till your last point, that is your auditory cortex, what four structures are in between? This is SLIM. Superior olive, lateral lemniscus, inferior colliculus, and medial geniculate body. Medial geniculate body. So if you know the answer, if you know the mnemonic, you can answer it very easily. Okay. Okay, fine. Coming to the next question, which is the last question. Which of the following is the final destination for much of the brain's information about emotion before action is taken? Okay, so something to do with emotions. Okay, so amygdala we cannot rule out. Okay, cingulate cortex also we cannot rule out. Prefrontal cortex also we cannot rule out. Hypothalamus, for the time being, we can rule out. Okay. So we have three options to ponder upon: amygdala, anterior cingulate cortex, and prefrontal cortex. Okay. Okay. See, anterior cingulate cortex is mainly for mood. More than emotions, it is for mood. So this can be easily ruled out as such. Because we see the word emotion, we will be confused with amygdala as the answer, and that is why it is option 1. Okay, we will be confused. But you see, the question is asking which of the following is final destination. Does amygdala take the initiative to plan an action? No, planning is done by what? Planning is done always by cortex. If I am feeling a certain emotion, what I have to do with this emotion? Okay, what have I to do with this emotion? Who will take this action? who will finally process this. This will be prefrontal cortex. It cannot be amygdala. Amygdala, not denying, involved in emotion. But the question is not asking which part is involved in emotion. Okay, the question is asking which of the following is final destination after processing the emotion before any action is taken. When we will take the action, when my emotion and my cognition, they will integrate. Okay, this is tough question, I would say. Only one tough question out of the 13. So tough also, or tricky, I would say. Okay, so the final decision maker, who is that? That is prefrontal cortex. That is always the cortex. Okay, so it is clearly telling now before the action is taking. So where will it see? If I have to feel some emotion, it will go from amygdala to prefrontal cortex. Now prefrontal cortex will decide whether I have to cry, whether I have to laugh, whether I have to ignore it. So before my final action is taking, where is my emotion? It is in the prefrontal cortex. Fine. So the answer here will be prefrontal cortex. I hope you have got something from this short video. Okay, short 13 questions of neuropsychology or biopsychology. Okay, so I am telling you, to understand biopsychology, your anatomy should be good, neuroanatomy should be good, and neurophysiology. If these things are clear, you will not make error in these kind of questions. Okay, however twisted they can give you, but you will not make any errors. Okay, thank you.